I am lecturing on acidification of the oceans, and it's a very important topic. And I want to let you know, too, I was spreading around this flyer, and since I use this flyer frequently, it becomes a frequent flyer. Just thought I'd share that with you. Okay. Anyway, as you all know, I teach at the school, and I've been here for almost 30 years at the school, and my main field is environmental science. At present, I teach biology, okay? And so twice a year, in October and in April, as close to Earth Day as possible, which is April 22nd, I give environmental lectures, okay? So this is the first lecture of the school year. And so today I'm talking about a very important issue which will affect us all if we are not careful, okay? And I'm going to tell you, too, all about acidification of the oceans and how we can stop it if we have the will. Just like everything, it's all a matter of will. So, anyway, I'm going to begin, and as you see, we have fancy footwork there. Yeah, come on in, guys. I'll wait for you. And as you can see, I have some pictures there on the flyer, and we're going to discuss all of these because these are very important. Thanks for coming. Oh, good.
Thank you.
And by the way, feel free to ask. Good. Feel free to ask any questions you want. I'll do the best I can in answering them. All right, so let's first see what is ocean acidification and why is that so significant. Because a lot of people like to eat fish. Also, a lot of people like to breathe. And so all this is related, believe it or not, as you're going to find out. Now, what is acidification? All right. First of all, acidification is the ongoing decrease in the pH of the Earth's oceans. And I'll explain to you what pH means. That has something to do with the acid and base. Normally, the ocean has a pH of about 8.21, but now it's below 8 probably a little bit below 8 even, and that is something to be worried about, because 821, of course, is on the basic side. Anything above 7 is basic, but it's something we have to worry about because you have minor changes in the pH that affect a lot of marine life, of which I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you both in pictures and a couple minute videos here, which will make my point. So again, the normal pH of the world's ocean, more or less, is 8.21. From 1751 to 1994, the pH decreased from 8.25 to 8.14. Now, unfortunately, it's still a little lower. You're going to ask, how did they figure out what the pH was in 1751? The answer is, I don't know, but that was a few hundred years ago. But nevertheless, if the literature says it, well, it might be true, and then again, it might not. Okay, so now you can't read this chart. I know you shouldn't have a PowerPoint with too much information, but I'll just point this out a little bit, the major features. This comes from a report from the World Wildlife Fund of 2015, which, as far as I know, it's this year, right? Okay, we have a whole bunch of problems, especially related to the oceans. Now, I want to point out that nearly 3 billion people rely on fish as a major source of protein, and we see that mainly in Asia, okay? Of course, we have fish here too. And what do the fish eat? The fish eat little organisms called algae and zooplankton that I'm going to talk about shortly. And if something happens to their food chain, then they won't eat, and that means the fish won't eat. And one of the biggest problems is the acidification of the ocean, because that is causing a demise or a diminution of these organisms that these other organisms depend on. Don't forget, everybody eats food. When you eat meat, you're actually eating other animals that ate other animals and so on, and we call this the food chain. All right, anyway, it says population of fish species utilized by humans have fallen by half, with some of the most important species experiences even greater declines. And as you can see, each sentence shows you it's a little colored. Each sentence is colored with a little different aspect. This one, just 3.4% of the ocean is protected, and only part of this is effectively managed, which means, unfortunately, there's a lot of corruption and a lot of things are not getting done because of politics and greed and money. And all this is really destroying the plant. Now, before we discuss any environmental issue, we have to discuss the term ecosystem. What is an ecosystem? An ecosystem are areas with living and non-living factors. We have two types of factors. The biotic, which means living, and that includes everybody in this room, the bacteria in you, on you, and in the air, and all over the place. So this is the biotic factor. However, everybody needs abiotic factors because unless you live in Mexico City or Houston or Bangkok, you need clean air with oxygen, right? I specify those cities because the air is pretty messy. As a matter of fact, the air is so bad in Mexico City that they want to change the name from Mexico City to Make-Sicko City because of the air. That's MAKE-SICKO. Because when you wake up in the morning in Mexico City, it's a bad day to breathe. I had the unfortunate experience for living, believe it or not, in Mexico City in 1968 for 5 months. Anyway, so we have these abiotic factors. You all need air, you need water, of course you have wind, you need gravity. If there was no gravity, everybody would be floating around. You need the atmospheric pressure. That's when they talk about the rain, and the sunshine. Low pressure areas are more susceptible to rain. And so anyway, you can't live without these, right? So you need the so-called abiotic factor. Now, here we have the effects of carbon dioxide. I want to point out a lot of this to you because this is very important. We know that carbon dioxide causes global warming, climate change, and ocean acidification. You also need carbon dioxide for breathing. You also have some receptors in your carotid arteries which influence your breathing. Whether you know it or not, that's a biological thing here. And anyway, so we have these effects. Now, I just want to point out, before I go into the pHs, we're talking about climate change. You heard what happened in South Carolina, right? They say the 1,000-year flood or 100-year flood, I heard it both, has wiped out a lot of those homes, okay? The only positive effect in South Carolina, a little black humor here, is that many of these people now have swimming pools in their basement. Okay, so that's the only positive effect. I'm sure none of them are making use of it. But anyway, so as you can see, all this is related. It's like if you get sick, a part of your body, let's say you have an illness somewhere, it'll affect other parts of the body, right? We all know that. So it's the same thing here. You have global warming, climate change, and now ocean acidification, and all these are directly related to carbon dioxide's effects. And I'll go into how we produce that in a few minutes. So we have natural effects of carbon dioxide we see here, which is actually good. Normal rain, okay? I bet many of you thought that normal rainwater has a pH of 7, which is neutral, but that's not true. It has a pH of 5.6. Why 5.6, which is slightly acidic? Remember, anything below 7 is acidic, anything above 7 is basic. Because the reason why the rain has a pH of 5.6 because it mixes in, when the rain comes down, you have natural carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, right? Okay, so that's going to give you a little acid on the acid side. So that's why you have a pH of 6. Now, also, those of you who study physiology, right, which I'm sure you did, right? Yeah. Okay, you have arterial blood, which is in the arteries, and then you have your venal blood, okay? The venal blood has a higher has actually more acid, therefore it has a lower pH than your arterial blood. Why is that? The venal blood runs in the veins. You have more carbon dioxide in the veins. When you have carbon dioxide in the veins, you are producing carbonic acid. And this is what's happening both in the rain and in your body. So your arterial blood has more oxygen and less carbon dioxide. Therefore, the arterial blood is slightly more basic than your venal blood. For the same reason, normal rain is 5.6, because you're actually producing something called carbonic acid. I'm sure those of you in chemistry know. You mix water and carbon dioxide and you get a lower pH. And I'm actually going to show you that here. I have this whole setup there, elaborate setup for you to show you this working. That's why I have my lab coat on. Okay. I know it's Halloween, it's mad science this time, but anyway. All right. Now, what causes carbon dioxide increase? Well, obviously, it's industry. I don't think anybody wants to live on there and breathe all that stuff. And, of course, we have too many cars. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to tell you this. The reason why we have too many cars because gasoline is dirt cheap. I think it should be between $50 and $100 a gallon. You might say, boy, how will people go to get to work? Well, if we're forced to change, then if we get rid of these or go solar, I don't even think electric cars are the answer. The only car is solar-powered ones, because everybody in this room is a result of solar power, because everything you eat comes from plants. Even if you eat the animals, the cows eat the plants, right? By the way, does anybody know why cows have bells? Because their horns don't work. Anyway, we all eat, and when you eat the meat, you eat the plants. Okay? Now, here is a chart which shows you direct correlation between CO2 increase and a lower pH. Okay? As you can see, this is the amount of parts per million of CO2, and parts per million means essentially, let's say you have 1 million gallons of something, and then you have 1 gallon of something else, and you put that something else in with all the other millions, that would be whatever, 1 part per million. So as you can see on this chart, as the CO2 increases, the pH is going down. Now we're still lucky that the ocean still has a pH still in the basic range, pretty close to 8. Okay. Now remember, it should have been around 8.21, but it's lowering. And unfortunately, I have numbers here to show you that are really in the 7.9 range, which is pretty bad. And I want to point out, at the time of the Industrial Revolution, which was around 1870, the amount of parts per million of carbon dioxide was about 270 parts per million. And since the Industrial Revolution, they started using coal and oil and heating up the machinery to turn, steam engines and stuff. You have to make heat to heat the water, and therefore you're producing more carbon dioxide. Now, I'm going to get into the pHs in a moment, but I also want to mention some other things which have helped cause increase of acidification of the ocean. They used incinerator ships many years ago, well, from 1972 to 1990. And what these incinerator ships did, the purpose of these ships is to get rid of hazardous waste and other waste. What's the best way to get rid of it? Unfortunately, to burn them, because then you lower the weight. But as you're burning them, as you can see in this picture, maybe can we shut off one of the lights? Yeah, let's see if we can do that. How about the other one? Yeah, that's good. Here we see the Vulcanus, which was a Dutch ship that burnt hazardous waste, and it's spewing out all this garbage, which is carbon dioxide essentially, and other stuff. Why did they do it over the ocean? Because they thought the ocean was a buffer, which means it'll remain constant. They didn't even think about the fact that this would cause acidification, because the ocean is pretty big. You have the Atlantic and the Pacific, and it's quite big. So what happens is the air, well, this is going to blow over the water, and then the water will act as a buffer. However, we can't keep doing that forever, because as we see, we are increasing the acidity. Now, I want to explain what pH is, and I'm going to show you a little experiment here. Here's a good chart that gives you examples of various pHs. Those of you who clean your ovens, you need something corrosive, something with a pH of 14, which is, has a very high pH. You don't want to put your hands in it. That's why you got to use rubber gloves. You try cleaning it with your hands, and I'm sorry to say, you probably won't have a hand left, okay? So anyway, these are the various pHs, and here we have baking soda, which I'm going to use today for an experiment for you. Anyway, you have various pHs, saliva, it's pH 6, urine, pH 6, drink. Soft drinking water, black coffee is a little on the acidic side, pH 5. Then you have tomato juice. Well, here it says acid rain. Acid rain, acid rain is anything below 5.6, okay? And that's another topic of discussion some other time. But anyway, you have tomato juice, grape juice, grapefruit juice, lemon juice, etc. These are all acidic, vinegar especially. And then you have hydrochloric acid and battery acid, okay? Which is sulfuric acid that they use in the batteries, okay? So this is a chart of pH. Now, what I'm going to do is, I have two ways of showing you pH. I am going to bubble hydrochloric acid in here, and then I have a pH meter. Now, what I have done, I have here something called a universal indicator. Watch what I'm going to do. I was here last night getting stuff prepped up. This is the universal indicator. It's a special liquid that's a matter that consists of dyes, and it changes pH according to the colors of the rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, etc. Now, this is acid. When you turn acid, this is base. When you add a base to the indicator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bubble carbon dioxide through the this thistle tube setup. I have here distilled water with 2 beakers, one there and one there. What I'm going to do is add the acid, and you're going to see a color change. Now, I have that to show you the pH meter. I also have an electronic meter as well as a chemical form here to determine the pH. As you're going to see, the pH is going to lower there, and you're going to see a color change there. If this works properly, you should get a color change like this yellow, because it's not very acid, but it's around 5. You understand? So you're going to see how this works right in front of your eyes. So let's see there. Okay. The pH meter, this was plain water that I have. It was distilled. It was sitting around all night. I had it covered though. According to the pH meter, it's 5.5. Okay. So what I'm going to do is get this. I'm going to pour. Wait a minute. I'm going to add some of this solution, which is a universal pH solution, into this beaker containing just plain water, distilled water. And this, I'm not adding anything to it. So this one's attached to the pH meter. So just to show you that there was no hanky-panky here, I have a diverter, so the carbon dioxide is going to go from here into here and here. And what I'm doing is I'm putting in baking soda and hydrochloric acid. Baking soda is sodium bicarbonate. Essentially, I could write it on the board what you're going to get. But anyway, I'm just making some carbon dioxide, and of course you should always wear your lab glasses, right? In lab, those of you who take chemistry, you do not want to do chemistry without your glasses. There it goes. Let's see if that works. There, see, look at that. Cool? So what did I just show you now? The pH meter, we got to shake it a little bit. So what does that mean? It's turning red. See it? Now let's read it. Let's see if this thing is. There it goes. There, it's working. Okay, let me get. So if we look at that color, it's red. It should be around 2 or 3. This is a special chart that's related to that. Now we'll go to the pH meter. There we go. See it? It's gone down to 4. It started off at 5.5. Do you see it? So that means it's working. So this is exactly what's going on in the real world. Hey, you know what? I had success. This stuff actually worked. Hey, what do you think? So cool. That means that God is with me here. Okay. Anyway, so as you can see, you sort of bubbled yourself, right? That means it worked. So there was no hanky-panky here. It's not like Watch Mr. Wizard here playing some little special game. Now the pH meter is down to 4.13. All I did was put a little bit of water in there. I mean, a little bit of carbon dioxide. Do you see it? So this is what's happening in the oceans. When we spew out all this carbon dioxide, it's forming, I don't have any liquid chalk here. But anyway, what you get, you're adding hydrochloric acid and sodium bicarbonate. You're getting carbon dioxide and probably sodium chloride being given off and a little bit of water, right? Most of them, that's it. Now, you know, you can buy these, you ever see in the kids' stores, you can make a volcano. You have to add baking soda and add vinegar to it, and then you get the whole fizzing to act as the volcanic flow. Well, it's similar. When you're adding vinegar to baking soda, you still will get carbon dioxide because you're having a reaction there. You see it? Okay, so anyway, as you can see, we're down to 3 now, and we started off with 5.55. You see? So this is what's happening in the ocean. Okay, so let's continue. Hey, things are working right. So anyway, here is the code for the universal indicator. All right. Now, here are some levels that were taken with the pHs. If you look over here at various areas, I'm not sure exactly where they took place, but if you notice, this one has a pH of 7.49. Well, in 2050, they imagine a pH of 7.49. Present levels now, look at this. In the recent past, it was 8.1. And present level is roughly, give or take, 8.069. And now they assume by 2050, if we keep adding this, you're going to have 7.9. That's pretty bad. Now, I'm going to show you how this affects the organisms that you all depend on. Okay? But first, let me show you this little diagram here. What's happening is, what we're getting there, you're adding CO2 to water, and then, of course, you're getting the carbon dioxide, the carbonate radical. Essentially, you're going to get carbonic acid. Okay? You see it? And that's essentially what you're getting. And this represents something called the sea butterfly, which I will explain to you in a few minutes. This is actually a mollusk, but this organism is part of the food chain. And what's happening to the shell, since it's made up of calcium carbonate, it's beginning to deteriorate because of the acidic environment. See? So I will explain. I actually have a little video on that. I have lots of stuff for you. And here is another graphic which shows you, in fact, I will use the arrow here to show you this. And if you see, you have carbon dioxide in the water. These are mussel shells. These are examples of caccoliths. A caccolith are calcified algae. They actually exist in the form of calcium with a calcium shell, and I'll explain that to you in a few minutes. But anyway, here you see we're getting carbon dioxide, water, which will give you carbonic acid. And then, that is very bad for the organisms because this is really lowering the pH. And as we're going to find out in a few minutes, corals, shellfish, clams, oysters, they need a basic environment in order to make their shells because the water will prevent the shells from being made properly. Okay, here we see now acidification and organisms. Scientists are warning that ocean acidification is affecting the microorganisms known as phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are little algae. Algae are microscopic plants. That's one of my hobbies, actually. I have a hobby of photographing algae. I have my own microscope with camera attachment and everything because it's a hobby of mine. And, some people collect stamps, butterflies. Hey, I collect pictures of algae that I take myself. Okay. Anyway, I used to identify algae in one of my former jobs. I used to work in Israel. I was there for 5 years. I was working on the Sea of Galilee for 2.5, studying the algae there. Okay, anyway, so phytoplankton are actually the base of the food chain because these are like the vegetables of the sea, you see? Okay. Anyway, so they play obviously a key role, and here you have clams. Hey, just for the hell of it, how many of you eat clams? Nobody? How many of you eat oysters? Well, for special reasons, you shouldn't eat them anyway, because you could get hepatitis or something like that. In fact, in Maryland, I used to live in Annapolis. They used to have these clam bars. I went over to one of these clam bars. I say, hey, why don't you put up a sign? Today we have a hepatitis special. All right. Anyway, I don't think they like that too much. But anyway, okay. Now, which organisms are affected by acidification? Obviously, many of you like oysters, clams, all that other stuff, shellfish, Shellfish, corals, pteropods. Anybody know what a pteropod is? Well, you're going to find out. These are sea butterflies. Of course, when you go out in April, May, June, you will all see butterflies, but that's another story. Okay, here we have algae. Notice it's in green, you see, because, hey, green is one of my favorite colors. Green and blue. Blue is the sky, green the color of algae and plants and chlorophyll. All right. Anyway, commercial fisheries depend also on all these foods because many people like lobsters, crabs, the restaurant Red Lobster and all this stuff. And, anyway, a lot of people depend on this, okay? The ocean is probably very healthy for you because you also get nutrients that you don't have to add, like iodine. In Asia and stuff, they get iodine from the seaweeds and the fish they eat. Here, you have to get it in salt, right? Iodized salt. And the reason why they put the iodine in, because if you don't eat a lot of seafood, you're not going to have a diet rich in iodine unless you eat certain foods. Now, I want to give you a little technical information here about how this affects the organisms. It says under normal conditions, calcite and aragonite, these are minerals, are stable in surface water since the carbonate ion is at supersaturating conditions. That's what we want. However, as the ocean pH falls, the concentration of carbonate ions required for saturation to occur increases, and when carbonate becomes undersaturated, structures made of calcium carbonate are vulnerable to dissolution, which means they can deteriorate, okay, in plain English. Therefore, if there is no change in the rate of calcification, the rate of dissolution of calcium material increases, and that's bad. You want to keep it supersaturated, and that's how they're able to get their calcium carbonate. And here we have oysters, and on the right of oysters, you'll see the oyster larvae called spat, S-P-A-T, okay? And by the way, if any of you who studied the ocean environment, by the way, that's my field, marine science, the adult organisms, most of the adult non-mammals, look totally different than when they're a baby, like these. These are actually ciliated organisms. These are the larvae called spat, and they have cilia coming. And they don't look anything like the adults, but they'll grow into an adult. And so it's very important that these shells produce the shell, and the shell is calcium carbonate. And if you don't have the calcium carbonate, it's obvious that they're not going to grow, and nobody's going to eat oysters. Here we see a crab. That's a blue crab. They also need it, even though their shell is made out of chitin, they still need that. Matter of fact, I had a friend come over. I used to live in Maryland. He wanted to go to a restaurant. He wanted to eat crabs. So I took him to the restaurant. He wanted to make sure they had crabs there. So I asked the head waiter, I say, do you serve crabs here? He says, yes, sir. We serve anyone. Okay, anyway. Now, then we have corals, okay? Now, we have here something real interesting. The tipping point for coral reefs is very important. Coral reefs are like the Grand Central Station in the marine environment. Why? Because this is where a lot of fish spawn, okay? The coral reefs. And the corals are actually made out of things related to jellyfish. They belong to the phylum Cnidaria, which includes corals, sea anemones, sea fans, things like this. Hydras, Portuguese man of war, things like this, jellyfish. And they're sort of very small, microscopic jellyfish-like organisms, and they produce the calcium carbonate. And if you don't have the reefs, you're going to be in trouble, because these act as the nursing beds for at least 25% of the marine environment. Now, what I'm going to do is play a little video for you here on this. Takes a while. So far, everything else works. Oh, well, I'm going to show you this first, and then I'll play a video. Here we have some information. This comes from the ecologist, just to show you. This shows you some acidification. We have some other stuff. How will it affect marine life? It'll affect humans, and fish stocks. I just wanted to show you this since I had it there, but I want to show you a movie in a moment. So we have tons and tons of stuff related to acidification. Okay, I just want to make you aware of that. Okay. This. All right. Anyway, here we see some more shellfish. I think it's over here, the one I wanted to show you. Let's see. Okay. I want to play this for you. It's only 2 minutes and 32 seconds.
The world's shellfish are in trouble, according to findings by polar scientists. Oysters, mussels, lobsters and crabs are finding it harder than ever to develop their protective shells, making them vulnerable to predators. The British Antarctic Survey says ocean acidification caused by climate change is to blame for the thinning shells. Professor Lloyd Peck led the research conducted at 12 sites across the world. He says the calcium carbonate needed by the creatures to build their shells is increasingly difficult for them to extract.
We've looked at these animals and their skeletons across temperature ranges because that's going to mimic what acidification is going to do in the sea. What we found is that where it gets colder and the calcium carbonate is harder to get out of the seawater, the animals have thinner skeletons. So it looks very much as if pH changes in the future and acidified oceans will force animals to have smaller skeletons.
The current threat is greatest in the polar regions, but will soon affect warmer climes.
One of the critical times is when the calcium carbonate becomes undersaturated. So it becomes less than fully saturated in seawater. That's predicted to happen in Antarctica between 2040 and 2050, and in the tropical regions and the temperate regions between 2050 and 2100. So we're looking at somewhere between the next 50 and 100 years for seeing those changes from saturated water to undersaturated water in many places around the world, but sooner than that in Antarctica.
Human emissions of greenhouse gases include carbon dioxide from burning fossil fuels, some of it dissolving in the ocean to form acid. Seafood consumers will inevitably be affected, according to Peck, although he's more concerned with potential damage to the ecosystem.
There are animals that we eat that are used for food consumption, like oysters and mussels and crabs and lobsters. They all make skeleton out of calcium carbonate. And if it becomes very hard for them to make skeletons, it means that it's likely to have a problem for their production for human consumption. But it also has problems on the ecological side, because animals with hard skeletons are fundamental parts of the ecosystem.
The survey is the latest in a series of warnings made by the scientific community about the harmful effects of global climate change. Jim Drury, Reuters.
Okay, so that gave you some information. Now, I imagine many of you who eat oysters, you slurp it down, right, in the sauce. You don't even taste it. So I figure you might as well call them Slurpees, right? That's what you do. You dip them in. Hey, you know, if you like the taste, you might as well get the sauce. You know, the shrimp sauce. It's made out of like ketchup and horseradish and stuff like this. And just dip bread in it. It probably tastes the same. That's probably healthier. You don't have to worry about hepatitis and stuff. See the guy, the way he slurped them? You know, I mean, you know, so might as well call them Slurpees. All right. Now, not only do we have large organisms that have calcium, but we have small ones, okay? And we have things which I'm sure some of you never heard of. They're called Foraminiferans, which are, they actually look like amullet shells, but they're microbes. They're related to the amoebas. And then you have coccoliths like this, which, this is a real cool, look like something like a buckyball. These are one of the physical things that scientists are making. But that's an actually green, that's an algae which contains chlorophyll. And this is a scanning electron micrograph of this. Looks beautiful, doesn't it? But that's what it is. They actually exist this way. This particular species is called Amylana huxley, abbreviated capital EHUX. That's the abbreviation because this is quite common. And these are sources of calcium carbonate, and they also produce dimethyl sulfide, which is what smells in the ocean. You know, I love the ocean. You ever smell the ocean? You smell the ocean. Smell has, and that's one of the major components of the smell. It's dimethyl sulfide, and that's the formula of it. All it contains is one sulfur and two methyl groups. Okay, very important. Now, here we see a satellite image of E. huxley, which is the organism I just showed you, in the Barents Sea. And for those of you who don't know where the Barents Sea is, you see it right there. There you have Scandinavia, the Barents Sea. It's right up there above Russia and around Russia and Scandinavia. See, so that's where it is. And these are very important for the food chain and for calcium deposits. We also have something called Coraline algae. Yes, these are actually algae which contain chlorophyll, but they look crustose, you know, crusty because of the calcium carbonate on them. These are real cool organisms. Like I say, I love algae because I like their looks, I like what they do. As a matter of fact, a couple of years ago, I spoke here in this very room about the algae in the environment on that, see? And so these are very important for the ecosystem. And that, if these do not grow properly because of the calcium problem, we're going to be in trouble. Because, you know, as we keep taking away species, the planet is getting less safe. It's just like a box or a big building. Let's put it this way. If you take out, let's say you have a very big apartment house. In the olden days, they used to build bricks. You take out a brick, nothing's going to happen. You take out another brick, nothing's going to happen. But each brick is actually weakening the whole system a little bit. Do you understand? So figure each species on the planet that you cause to go extinct is going to eventually cause the whole thing to come down. You can't keep taking bricks out of a building, right, without it falling down. Sure, it might have 1,000 or a few thousand bricks, but as you take out each brick, you're weakening the structure. Doesn't that make sense? Well, it's the same in the ocean or anywhere in the environment. Whether you cut down the trees, you lose grass species, you blow up mountains to build roads. You see the point? You dig up the oil, which is weakening the ground. You know, that's where you're going to get sinkholes. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff we can do. Now, the thing you've been waiting for, sea butterflies. What are sea butterflies? Well, sea butterflies belong to the phylum Mollusca. Anybody know what else belongs to the phylum Mollusca? Octopus, clams. I know they don't look alike, but they all belong here. Octopus, clams, squid. Why are they mollusks? Because they all have three characteristics. Those in my biology class will find out that they have a muscular foot, they have a mantle which covers the soft visceral mass. So they have a soft visceral mass, a mantle, and a muscular foot at some time in their life. So these are mollusks, okay? And some people have mantles too, except that's over their fireplace, but that's another story. That's what I mentioned, same word. Funny, yeah, same word, you know. Okay, I doubt any of these mollusks have a mantle in their home with a fireplace. Anyway, okay. So we have two orders. These are two groups called Gymnosomata and Thecosomata, and they make up a big part of the plankton. Now remember, I mentioned to you phytoplankton. Well, the ocean has another type of plankton called zooplankton. Zooplankton actually eat the phytoplankton. As you can figure out, the zooplankton are the animals, okay? And so they eat the phytoplankton. So anything that's planktonic means it goes with the flow. Even jellyfish are considered planktonic because they go with the flow, and even though they can swim, they really don't have much power. They have to go with the flow of the ocean. Now, let's look at Theropods. These are real interesting. Notice we pronounce it Theropod even though it begins with the letter P. Something like psychiatrist. Psychiatrists begin with the letter P, and of course we don't pronounce it. There it is. Now, I want to show you this. Isn't that cool? I have some more photographs, movies, but if you look closely, you can see that's part of the heart beating. Isn't that cool? Now you're going to ask the size of these things. They're only about 1 or 2 or 3 centimeters, so they're not very big, less than an inch, okay? And these actually serve as part of the food chain. Now, I believe I have a slight movie here on this too. I'm going to show you this too in a few minutes, and you're going to see these are very important because here's a normal theropod. When the normal acidity, this is when it's beginning to deteriorate because a little on the acid side, and here you see there's a lot of acid. You can see the whole shell is beginning to disintegrate. Do you see it? And that's similar to what I have done here. Now, if I added calcium carbonate, which are marble, which we do buy in chemistry stores, you add an acid to it, you're still going to get bubbles. And this is what we got here. Because oyster shells, you know, chalk, which is calcium carbonate, you get the same thing. You add, well, this is actually made out of calcium carbonate and some other stuff. But when you add acid to calcium carbonate, you're going to get bubbles, just like I showed you there. And this is what's happening. You're disintegrating the shell of this mollusk. Now, I want to point out that not all mollusks have shells, but things like slugs, you see them on land. By the way, we also have mollusks on land. You have a lot of snails, sea slugs, things like this. They're all mollusks. All right, let me show you this movie here. This one, he explains a little bit too.
Things used to be better around here. You can afford to raise a family here.
Now people have to work 2
You gotta live
jobs,
with the
but
commercial
still
folks
live
to
cheap.
get too commercialized.
Big corporations get tax breaks. Well, my friends can't even make the card payments.
It's great for rich CEOs. They're making millions.
We need someone on our side.
Carol Gregory is working to help local folks get on their feet again.
She works for us, not the rich and big corporations. That's why.
I'm voting.
For Carol Gregory.
I know who she is.
We've been studying the chemistry of ocean acidification along our coast from Canada to Mexico since 2007.
We understood to what extent the ocean acidification was changing the water chemistry, but we had no idea to what extent the marine life had been affected by ocean acidification. So theropods are very, very small, right? Some of the individuals that I have been working on are not much bigger than the size of a pin.
But they have a snail-like shell that you would expect to see on a beach. And that shell, it turns out, is very, very thin. And you can see the heart beating in the animal right through the shell. It's so beautiful. And what is important is that these animals are very, very sensitive to acidification. Now, with the additional amount of anthropogenic CO2 from humankind, about 30% of the water that's upwelled on our coast is corrosive. This is a major change to the ecosystem. When we get close to the corrosive conditions, those shells will begin to dissolve while the animals still alive. And consequently, this has a huge impact on the animal's ability to swim, on the animal's ability to avoid being eaten by predators. And it's really stressful to see how much the animals are being impacted by acidification.
Right now, along the west coast, in this huge region along the west coast, especially the coastal regions, we saw approximately 50% of theropods having severe shell dissolution.
The reason why we are concerned about this is theropods are a critical organism that provides a food source for things like salmon and mackerel and herring that are really important to the food chain in the Pacific Northwest and to human beings who love to eat salmon for food.
You know, it has not dawned on us until very recently to what extent we have changed the marine ecosystems, right? So that it is really a first indication of what is going on in our ecosystems. And this is only the beginning.
Okay, so that gives you an idea. Now, let's continue. All right, so, let's continue. Now, here you see, I want to show you something else about theropods. I have one more little bit of information, and I still have show you. Okay, here's another show about that. This one's real cool. Remember, plankton means free swimming, or free floating actually.
Look at this animal. It's completely transparent. You don't need a CAT scan to see its heart beating, its bronchial tubes breathing, its intestines, its reproductive organs, this one's a male, its shiny black eyes and wing-shaped foot. This animal is called Atlanta. It belongs to the Heteropoda and Theropoda family of mollusks. Ptero, wing, pod, foot. Also called sea butterflies, these snails use their feet as wings for swimming. There are many different species measuring from a few millimeters to several centimeters. Theropods have two wings on either side of a soft body, sometimes protected by a shell. Some theropod mollusks are voracious predators that go as far as cannibalism. Watch how the little gymnosome latches onto its cousin, the graceful Chrysis, and extends its trunk right into the shell to suck out its prey. It's not a good time to be a theropod. Not only are they the favorite prey for fish, but since human activities are causing the oceans to become more and more acidic, theropods find it hard to produce their calcareous shell. Are they doomed to extinction?
Cool, huh? Isn't that great? So, these organisms are very important. fact, every organism is important. As you can see, they all depend on each other. Now, is the human race important? That's another thing that we can leave that open for discussion. I have one more quickie on this, and then I still got, I don't think I have any more movies for you, but I want to show you this particular one. This one with Sigourney Weaver, the woman who played an alien, and I just want to show you, she goes up in here about 8 minutes, about, show you this.
What if shellfish could no longer build shells? Would they cease to exist?
We'd go more on Terrapods.
Perhaps. Shelled creatures such as corals and plankton play a key role in the ocean food web. Pteropods are a kind of plankton that live all around the world and in great abundance in polar waters. Theropods are especially vulnerable.
That's a scanning electron microscope.
We're looking at pteropod shells, which are planktonic snails with a calcium carbonate shell that we collected from Antarctica this past winter. And you can see it looks like there's this lift where it may have already started to dissolve and kind of curled over, because that's what it looks like when it dissolves. It kind of melts, almost like a candle and wax melting. The shell thickness along the leading edge right here is less than 1 micrometer thick. These are the thinnest pteropod shells I've ever seen.
There's growing alarm that higher acidity will extinguish creatures like pteropods that are a basic food source for fish. In many parts of the world, fish are a basic food source for people.
So you can't just worry about the big things in the ocean, you have to worry about what they eat. And where their food comes from. If the smallest things in the ocean are affected by ocean acidification, then it ripples all the way up the food web, making the largest things in the ocean even more in danger.
As individual strands disappear, the entire food web becomes weaker, more vulnerable, less beneficial to humankind.
And many of us are concerned about what that means for the Earth's marine ecosystems.
Anyway,
But
you
also
get the idea. We don't have to keep expounding on that. Okay, now, who do we blame for this catastrophe? Okay? I'm a real, here, come on in. I'm a real fanatic about this. As you're going to see, what you're going to see here, we blame the oil company. And I'm going to show you this. Watch. Who do we blame? Well, okay, all right, we'll go here. Okay, now, let's open here. I want to show you something. This is something that these people should be ashamed of themselves. I was reading a lot of articles about this global warming in particular, and guess what? There was something just a couple days ago. Look, October 9th, 2015, right? That was just a few days ago. And they knew the fact that many years ago in the 70s, Exxon, what's now ExxonMobil, they knew that what they were doing was contaminating the planet, was causing climate change. They knew it, but they didn't do anything about it. So what did they do? Instead of doing something about it, they followed the old tobacco people. Remember, they said tobacco smoke doesn't cause cancer, and they had a lot of people poo-pooing that idea. Well, they got the same people who said that tobacco doesn't cause cancer to say that oil and carbon dioxide doesn't cause climate change. And they actually knew it. And they have these articles that are coming out now. ExxonMobil knew it about 40 years ago, but because they cared more about the money than helping the people or helping the planet, we're in deep trouble. Okay? I didn't make this up. This was just an article. And then, for those of you who read the New York Times online, they had some hypertext articles that I pressed there, and I got more articles from this article. You see it blue, I clicked on it, and I have it. You understand? So one article leads to another saying how there was a cover-up, as you can see here. All you got to do is go on here, climate change. Then they talk about a series of articles. Here they say documents from ExxonMobil. It goes on and on and on about what they knew, you see? So I'm just pointing this out to you that it's never ending, this situation here, okay? So they knew about this problem and they didn't do anything about it because all they cared about was the usual. It's the money. Everything depends on money. And that's one of the solutions, is to get rid of money. But I don't want to get into that now. Then here we see another article called Exxon, the road not taken. It says here, Exxon's own research confirmed fossil fuel roles in global warming decades ago. For those of you who don't know, a decade is 10 years. We're talking about 1970s, which was 40 years ago, right? So you see, they knew about it, yet they didn't do much about it. Okay, just like the tobacco industry. As I again mentioned, I know I repeat myself, but that's because I drive an Echo. But anyway, the point was, they hired the tobacco deniers. You know, they wanted to make sure that it's okay to sell tobacco, even though they knew it caused cancer, but they have to tell the people it doesn't cause cancer because all they care about is the money. You know, so anyway, you get the idea. So anyway, this has a lot of articles. Here it says, Exxon believed deep dive into climate research would protect its business. So they didn't want to go deep enough, which means they didn't want to go more into it. You can see, and then they did actually research on this boat. This was a super tanker. They actually placed machinery up there to measure the carbon dioxide. Anyway, they knew about it. And it said here, Exxon confirmed global warming consensus in 1982 with in-house climate models, okay? I don't have to keep going on in this. Well, let's see what this one says. But you get the idea. Well, that gives us back to the road not taken. You know, and what that means is they just wasted all this time. Here's another article called Industry Ignores Climate Change, okay? Here, industry ignored its scientists on climate change. So, Exxon had its own scientists that said climate change exists, but they don't want to listen to them. You understand? Because it's all about the money. Now, I think you all get the idea. This just goes on, and then I have another article here called Smoke and Mirrors, which they talk about, and here. This article says, Smoke and Mirrors, Hot Air, how Mobil uses big tobacco tactics to manufacture uncertainty on climate change, okay? So these are the things that, first of all, common sense plays a role, okay? We know it's happening, they just don't want to admit it because it's all about the money. And I don't have to read this for you, but I want to show you this. Let's see if this comes up. Yeah, I think it does. There we go. This is a PDF article, and look at the title, Smoke and Mirrors and Hot Air, how ExxonMobil uses big tobacco tactics to manufacture uncertainty, okay? It's a very long article, it's 68 pages, and I read some of it, and you know, they hired people to lie and all this, so it's the usual nonsense. You don't expect much from industry, I'll tell you. This guy, he makes a good Halloween mask, doesn't he? In fact, yeah, like, oh God, you are Lee Raymond. Quick, run for the hills. Hey, look at him. He's Mr. Evil in this because he was the chairman of Exxon. He knew damn well what was going on. Boy, come on, look at him. Anyway, he was the CEO.
Here's a pointer.
Oh,
So you
got
don't,
one.
and then you can.
Does that have a laser?
Yeah, I'll plug this in, and then you can advance your slides.
Oh, you've got one. Well, we need the.
Yes.
You got to plug that in.
Yes, sorry.
I'm
Sorry.
almost finished. Anyway, so he is. Thank you, folks. This is Leslie Dubin. She's one of my good friends. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't have. Boy, this works. Let's see if this works now.
It should advance. You advance it on the sides and the
Yeah,
pointer
it's not
in the
working.
middle.
Yeah, that's okay. It didn't work, but at least the laser
Here.
worked.
Is the laser working?
Yeah. Well, I'm almost done anyway. I have a couple more. All right. Now, what are the solutions? Yeah, try it. The laser works.
Okay, so the laser's working.
Yeah.
The slides are not advanced.
Yeah, that's okay. I just have a couple more slides.
Technology should be working.
Technology is only good when it works.
Okay,
Thank you.
laser better than not.
Laser better, right. Okay. Anyway, now, what are the solutions? Well, you know, it's kind of late to even do too much about it, but we can at least limit. I hope it's not too late, but just think we wasted 40 years, don't you think? 40 years ago they knew it. This is the problem. They're waiting and waiting, you know, and things just get worse. Okay, what's the solution? I keep saying, we got to go solar, okay? Well, in the meantime, you know, we wasted all this money on these stupid wars and everything, trillions of dollars that we could have spent on doing energy research and saving the planet, and instead of destroying these countries, helping to build them up, okay? There are ways to do it, I believe, if we had the political will. But, you know, I joke around about a lot of jokes, and there's one type of joke I don't like, and that's political jokes. You know why? The answer is simple, because too many get elected. Okay, anyway. And these are the real reasons nothing's getting done. Now, we could use electric cars, except they're pretty expensive. I think the cheapest one you can get is the Leaf, totally electric. I'm not talking about a hybrid. The totally electric is the Nissan produces the Leaf. I think the cheapest model is $30,000. Then you have Tesla, which their models range in the $60,000. It's supposed to come down to $30,000 and $40,000 in the next few years, but that's kind of expensive. And you know, they are selling a few thousand, but certainly not like the other companies are selling. And then, of course, we have to get rid of all fossil fuels, and I mean all of them. And like I say, go to solar. We shouldn't even burn things. You keep hearing of biofuels and things like this. Well, you know, I told you I teach environmental science, and I'm really against biofuels, because how do you get a biofuel to work? You got to burn it. That's basically what it is. You take the fat and you burn it, and that burns me up. That we have to burn this stuff. You see, that's why biofuels, this is another smoke and mirrors ploy produced by the media. You see, a lot of them never took an environmental class with me. That's why they give you this nonsense, you know, because they don't really know what's going on. And then you got to become an activist like I am. I'm a hellraiser. I should point out, a couple months ago I met with Jan Schakowsky. It took me 2 months to set up an appointment. I went to her office down on Broadway. I met with her. I told her some of these issues. I hope she'd pay attention. I gave her a list of 12 things that we should worry about guns, the ocean, the environment, things like this. I hope she takes that into consideration. And another thing, you have to talk, well, like I did. You talk to your congressman, okay? Now, if you are, you should talk to your politicians if they'll pay attention. However, if you're from Oklahoma, you have a very big problem, because you got this guy. His name is James Inhofe. Have any of you ever heard of him? He is the chief denier in the Congress. Now, he belongs to the R party, okay? And he's in charge of the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works. Now, here we have a fellow. I want to show you this picture. There's James Inhofe, and this is Chris Hayes. He's very good. He's on MSNBC. He's a very brilliant commentator. And here you see him with a picture of James Inhofe. And James Inhofe, he's such a denier about climate change, he actually wrote a book called The Greatest Hoax. It says how the global warming conspiracy threatens our future, you see? And he's just talking about, I think, mainly the financial aspect. Well, we got to have the economy going. You know, if you're dead, I don't think you can spend much money, right? Or if you're up to here in water, I don't get much office work done, right? You see the point? And this is what I'm driving at. And here's another Halloween mask, folks, if you want. All right. Now, for more information about this, you can go to these organizations. I also put my webpage on there because I have it, and I have a lot of stuff on there. These are what you can do. 350.org. That number 350 is very significant. What does that mean? Well, that means, this is an organization. The number 350 means 350 parts per million should be the highest amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. It was formed by an environmentalist called Bill McKibben. He has written many books. One of them one of his titles is Maybe One, and that has to do with the population. He thinks people shouldn't have more than one child. And anyway, that was one of his books. He has written a few others, but he founded this organization called 350.org. There's a lot of information. There's also in many languages. And again, I suggest you go on it. He has a whole bunch of stuff. He has some animations, you know. He tells you about a whole bunch of stuff, fossil-free, road-through Paris, a whole bunch of stuff. You don't have to belong to go on the website. I imagine if you want to donate money, you can. And see, it's all over the world, these issues, because, hey, the environment, everybody lives in their environment. That's only on this planet. Now, unless we go to other planets, this is the only one we have at the time being. So you can get in all these languages, quite a bit. I think that's Korean. Am I correct? Vietnamese, I believe, is Korean. This is Russian. And the rest you can figure out yourself from there. So at least he has many languages. Okay, that's one place you can go to. They're very good. And then you can go, which I'm a member of too, the Union of Concerned Scientists. This is an organization that I've belonged to for the last couple of years. They send you literature. They send you two items every month. One is called Catalyst, which is a magazine about what they're doing with the environment, and the other one is the newsletter from the Union of Concerned Scientists, and they're mainly concerned with the environment. Okay, all these other issues, especially air pollution, stuff like this, and they're quite a big organization, and I'm proud to be a member of them. And they have some thousands of people who join. I don't think you have to be a scientist to belong. I mean, because they're trying to get the word out that we're in trouble. And then you have organizations like Greenpeace and stuff, and the World Watch Institute, which publishes. I should have put that down too. Yeah, there's an organization called the World Watch here. I'll just go on direct. I forgot to put that in there, but I'll show it to you. And they publish a lot of stuff. WorldWatch.org. They publish a lot of magazines, and every year they come out with something called Vital Signs, which is a book. Now you can get it for $25. As a matter of fact, I just ordered it. And they show you the latest trends in agriculture, population, industry, how much solar energy is put in, wind energy, things like this, agriculture. They're really good. And it tells you about the world. They have 2 pages devoted to each of these issues, and they give you statistics, how much grain was produced, how many people are being born, things like this. So there's a lot of information there. It's the World Watch Institute, which is quite a good organization. They used to have a magazine called World Watch Magazine, but they got rid of it because evidently they found there better ways of making their point. That one had no advertising in it. I used to read every word. It's quite interesting. I kept all my issues, by the way, because I use that. I tried to write some books, and I use that as references, so I never throw out those magazines. There was another magazine which doesn't exist anymore. It was called Garbage, and I kept all of those too. And they, unfortunately, they got rid of those also because of, I guess, money problems. And then you can get my webpage at davids-earth.org. I have a lot of stuff on there. I have here's my home page, which is what you see. And if you look on the right, these are various links that I have relating to the environment and some lectures, which you can also get on YouTube. Here's one on Ebola. I spoke about that. That's a lecture. And then I have links to various air pollution sites. Copepods are the most abundant animal in the world. They're found in the oceans and in fresh water. They eat, these are actually zooplankton, which eat the phytoplankton. And then I have another lecture. Well, this one, for some reason, was taking off. I tried using it the other day. That was a lecture of mine. And, it's on. What can happen if nuclear power go? Wow, that was on there. So you must have gone to a different webpage. It was on the other. It was off yesterday. So anyway, it's back on. That's real interesting because they talk about bioinvasion and some stuff. Large jellyfish in Chernobyl. What do they all have in common? See for yourself. Then I have some videos that some students made of me, and plus I have some lectures on here. There's one in particular called. What's it called? It's called Reflections of Purpose, where some students at Columbia College, where I teach downtown, since it's a film school, journalism school, things like this, the students asked me to do programs with them, and I have. I made movies with them, actual movies. I do interviews with them. I do a whole bunch of stuff because they want the teachers to do it with them. And they made a movie, one about me, which she got an A for. It's an 8-minute movie called Reflections of Purpose. You can put that on too. And then here I have my resume. Oh, I have my books. I've written 2 books. But anyway, I'm not here to show off myself. I'm just showing you I have this. It's a resume. This has to do with where I keep test outlines and things, and then there's a biography of me, and then I like to give lectures. So instead of having Have Gun Will Travel like the old TV show, I have Lecture Will Travel. Pretty cool. And then I have ways to contact me. So that's the third thing. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do. By the way, this is Borneo. Isn't that nice? I wish the whole world would look like that. Instead, we have a choice of keeping it that way or destroying it. Next. Now, a special thanks to Professor Mary Ringstack for her mentorship. I tell her to review my stuff because she's an excellent speech teacher. Anyway, you want to get the lights. Are there any questions? So, yes, Leslie, go ahead.
Well, I have two comments.
Yeah.
First of all, as a business instructor and on the money side of things, what I've noticed is, has anybody seen the new commercial with Matthew McConaughey with the Lincoln, where he's trying to sell a Lincoln? Has anybody seen that one? Where he goes, well, it's not about tree hugging, and it's not about... So I think that businesses are trying, I'm defending a little bit of playing devil's advocate here. They're trying to move in the right direction, but they're afraid to, because someone who's got, 50, 60,000 to spend on a Lincoln Continental doesn't want to be thought of as a tree hugger, but if they can do something right at the same time, like you said, the Teslas, as far as I know, I had 2 students do reports on them, they're about 90,000 still.
No, the cheapest is 60.
Oh, there's one for 60
You can get
now?
many prices. They have different models.
Yeah, but then on the flip side, I read an article in the New York Times today that said conservatively, in our lifetime, maybe not mine, maybe not yours, but in your lifetime, the global cities will be threatened. So New York, if you have any older relatives living in Miami, LA.
Threatened by what? Sea rise?
Yeah, by the rise in the sea level. And so, I agree with Dave totally that, we're just kidding ourselves. So you guys have to go out and do something. We're the generation that's got to fix it.
Thank you. Stu has a question.
I'm generally a Democrat, but I listen to a station called 560 on the FM dial, which is, I think, Fox News.
Yeah.
And they had Ted Cruz, which I don't like, but he's a very, very good debater. He was on the Princeton debate team. And he was in an investigation with the head of the Sierra Club just last week.
Right.
And Ted Cruz was asking the president of the Sierra Club if he was familiar with the fact that for the last 18.6 years, the climate has not warmed. In fact, it's stayed the same for 18.6 years.
Who said that? Ted Cruz?
Which is true, supposedly. So he agreed. The guy from the Sierra Club agreed. And he used a word called pause. Are you familiar with that word called
That
pause?
means, well, we use that a lot when we determine the layers of the atmosphere. It's like it's a hold pattern for a while, I guess. Is that what it means?
So it was just rather interesting. And they were debating that because for 18.6 years, there hasn't been a change. So,
Well, they said that this past July was the warmest July since they recorded it.
that's why Republicans have one stance, the Democrats have another stance as a, I don't know.
Well, you go with the
citizen.
scientists.
I really don't know who's right.
Go with the scientists, because the politicians will make you believe
Well, they don't
anything.
care.
Go with the scientists.
Well,
They're
they
the
say
ones.
97, in the same conversation, they said that 97.8% of all scientists agree there is global warming,
Right.
but the statistics for the last 18 years is not backing it up.
Well, you got to see who wrote the statistics that he's talking about. You see, that's the point, guys. You got to be wary what these news. And by the way, as you all know, the news is no longer news; it's more like entertainment. Who the hell cares about these baseball players getting in trouble and the movie actors? We have these real issues, right?
Well, it's like you showed something really interesting. I'm sure your students are aware of this. What you showed them was 60 or 70 pages. That was what we call
the smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, that's called a peer-reviewed journal. That means other professionals have gotten together, other PhDs, doctors, scientists, environmentalists, and they actually backed up this they falsified this, or their data somehow managed to support it. And so that was a peer-reviewed journal full of smoke and mirrors.
Well, what they do is, if they don't like the results, they do enough. Like if you want to test, like I found out the other day, we have a person here whose wife works for a testing service to test foods and things like this. If a company pays you to see that their results are good or not, and you come up with bad, and they say it's bad, you just have to go to another company who will test it. You see?
Yeah,
and that's what they do.
underwriters or somewhere where you'll get the results you want.
In fact, I think that's what happened with the peanut. Remember the peanut guy? He knew his peanuts were contaminated, and he sold them for, no, he got 30 years in jail or 28 because he knew they were defective. He sent, first, as a matter of fact, he sent it to a lab, and this lab found out that your peanuts are not good. They're toxic. So instead of doing that, you go to another lab. It's like a story I heard. Many years ago, a guy was telling me about a South American pilot. He was in the airplane, he turned on the engine, and he said there's something wrong with the engine. So what did the company do? They replaced pilots. They replaced him with another pilot, you know. That's what they're doing. You see the point? I don't know what happened to the plane, but the guy told me because he knew about that story. You see?
I have one last question. There's this huge outbreak of salmonella. It's in Wisconsin and Indiana.
In what foods?
Spinach.
Spinach, yeah, we heard about that.
And so my question to you is,
Yeah.
was it salmonella, E. coli?
Yeah.
But how do they know that it's not in Illinois? I mean, and how did they find it? Do people just start getting sick? I mean,
maybe they
or
test
did they
it.
hide it? Or
Yeah, I don't know. They might test it. That I couldn't tell you. It's probably tested.
what did they? Oh, the distribution. Oh, you mean like which warehouse they shipped it to? Yeah.
By the way, if anybody wants business cards, if you want to get a hold of me, I have them here. I give lectures for free anywhere if you want. I do that. Anybody wants me, I give lectures.
Thank you.
Yeah. Go out and save the world now, folks. Recycle, don't get an electric car.
He brings an extra something. Two lectures.